Good morning, everybody. This is Chihiro with Beyond Stocks, and I'm super excited to have our guest Nic Espanet on today. We have a real interesting shared history we are excited to share with you all today. So, before we get into that, I want to thank our generous sponsor, which is Porter and Company CPAs. So Vince Porter there has been my personal and business CPA for the better part of a decade at this point. And the thing you need to know about CPAs is they're like doctors, by which I mean they're specialized. And so if you're investing in private offerings or you're leading your own deals as a general partner in a private offering, you want a CPA. You need a CPA that is going to be really good and experienced with private offerings and partnership accounting specifically. Not all accountants are going to have that as an area of expertise. So for your needs as a passive or active investor in private offerings, I recommend Porter and Company CPAs. Reach out to them at mytexascpa.com. All right, Nic, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Chiro. I'm excited to visit with you today.
Yeah. So we got to tell everybody like how we ran into each other. I don't think we know exactly where it was where we first met in person, but of course, my first multifamily deal was a 128 unit property called Riata Ranch in Abilene, Texas, which incidentally was right next to a property that you owned and operated. I don't know if you still own that property.
Well,
to it.
we sold Sunscape, which was a shared. Well, it had a common border, but there's actually about a 40-foot strip of grass in between that. Now they've built 4 or 5 duplexes. They squeezed in that little narrow area in between Sunscape and Riata Ranch.
Is that right? Okay.
Sold Sunscape. We still own Riata Ranch. We bought that in December of 2020, and November of 23 we bought a property across the street called The Edge, across the street and one lot over. So
Judge Ely Boulevard.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Yes. So that's what's crazy, you guys, is I bought this property with my partners in 2019, sold it to Nic, who is continuing to operate that property called Riata Ranch, the 128 unit property. So you have a significant presence now in that market of Abilene, Texas, right?
Yeah, we have over 600 units there, and we're actually looking. I mean, we're still looking to buy there. We are in the process of negotiating a PSA, purchase sale agreement, for another property that surrounds Riata Ranch and Edge, right in that same area.
Got it. Okay. So the takeaway there for our listeners is, whether it's multifamily or some other aspect of private equity investing, it's a small world. Like you buy from and sell to like people that are your colleagues, so it's important to act with integrity and just be on the up and up, because you never know when you're going to cross paths.
Exactly. And it shows that there's always meat on the bone. You're not trying to screw the next buyer. You're trying to go and implement your business plan and leave some meat on the bone for that next buyer, because you want it to be a win for them. Because like you said, it is a small world, and you're going to come across them. You may buy something from them in the future. They may buy something for you. So, not being deceptive and, and I think 99% of the population has that same mindset. But you do need to be a little cautious, but I think it's great that there's still meat on the bone. I mean, I know several of my peers that have bought and sold to and from one another, that there's still something left for the next buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. So, take us back to like how you became motivated to and inspired to become a full-time investor, because you, like me, you were in a completely different occupation and then made a transition to becoming a full-time investor. So talk to us about that.
So I went to school, actually got my master's for physical therapy, and did that for almost 20 years. And I was looking for something different to do with my retirement investment portfolio. The stock, I try to learn more and more about stocks, and that it just bored me to death. I mean, so then I started looking at real estate, thinking I was going to get in the single family world. But as I was doing more and more research, I came across multifamily and came across a couple of different mentoring programs, ended up signing up for one, and initially thought I was just going to passively do it. I was going to invest in other people's deals, did that for a couple of times. And then the more as I watched, I'm like, I think I can do this myself. And I wanted that freedom of being, I enjoyed being a physical therapist, but I had to answer to somebody else on a daily basis. I had to be there and kind of punch the clock. I had read Rich Dad Poor Dad maybe a few years before that and started wanting, you just got in the mindset of I wanted my money to work for me instead of me working for my money. And so I learned, I decided to jump in full force, learned how to go about buying multifamily assets through a mentorship program, and was able to get my first deal at Sunscape, which is next door to Riata Ranch, was a 100-unit property. So my first real estate investment, well, not investment, I did passively in other people's deals, but the first one that I syndicated was a 100-unit property. So I skipped the single family fix and flip, and which a lot of people will kind of work their way up. So that's how I got into it. Just in my initial intention was not to replace my job at and I didn't do that initially. I didn't do that until my fourth deal before I left physical therapy about 4.5, 5 years ago. But I was just looking for some kind of a different retirement. It's something different to do with my retirement funds, but then getting kind of dipping my toe in it, seeing that it could be done, and then realizing I can do this. I can, work from home. I can really work from, as long as I have a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection, I can work from anywhere. Now I try, my goal is to visit our properties at least once a month. I try to get out there twice a month. So, every 2 to 6 weeks, depending on how things are going. But, it's not like I can just zip around the world nonstop, but, if I could be in another continent and do most of what I'm doing, a lot of times just overseeing the operation side.
Now, how hard was that transition from being a passive investor or a silent partner in a couple multifamily deals to running your own deal, and being the leader effectively of a deal?
I don't know that it was hard. It just took persistence because we made lots of offers, looked at lots of deals. That's what when I talk to people about what we did, I'm like, it's not brain surgery. It's not building a rocket. But it's persistence. I think it's, comes back to having resilience and sticking with it. And you want it to be somewhat hard, because if it wasn't difficult, everybody would do it, or it wasn't challenging, everybody would do it, and you wouldn't be able to make any money at it. So
Exactly. The profit will be competed out of it.
Exactly. So that, it was a challenge. Now I was kind of in a good spot on my physical therapy world because I was doing more contract stuff at that point. So I could kind of ramp down my therapy as my real estate income ratcheted up. But it still was a big transition, flipping over. I was in my mid 40s when I decided to do it. So, big changeover. And, it's something that I'd done for 20 years, is a different walk, but I love it. I don't regret it a bit. We've been through a bit of a downturn in this cycle. So that's, any other downturn in my adult life, I've been in healthcare, and that just kind of keeps chugging along. So it's been an experience, but I feel like we're working out of that. I'm blessed to have a wife that supported me through doing it. When I started, my kids were 8, 6, and 2. So having small kids going through that time period was a bit nerve-wracking, but we've been able to make it. It's been about 10 years since I switched, and 5 that I've completely stopped the therapy side.
Got it. Now, one thing that struck me with what you just said, Nick, is you got started in your mid 40s. And so I think that is inspirational to a lot of people to think, hey, this is a mid-career person who made a completely different transition from your area of expertise and specialty to something else. And I think you really took life by the horns in making that change.
Yeah, it's once I was in, I was all in. And part of it came, we had a challenge. We had to replace a property management company, and we're having some pretty significant challenges on another property there in Abilene. And my wife and I had a conversation like, hey, if we're going to do this full force, we need to do it. And I didn't physically move to Abilene, but I was spending 2 or 3, 4 days a week, maybe driving home to go to my kids' evening events and driving back the next day, or spending the night out there in a hotel. But that's when I decided I would completely shut down my therapy and go out there and take over that property that was having challenges. And with that one, I would do trash outs. I had one major trash out I think it was a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, but I filled my F-150 truck bed, I think 4 times, and took stuff to the dumpster. I took over pretty much the property management until we could get a better property management company out there, just sorting through all of our vacant units. I ranked them like, hey, these are easy ones that we only need to clean. These are the ones that are in horrible shape. We're going to save those for later. Let's get the easy, low-hanging fruit taken over. So that's what gave me the last nudge to completely get out of therapy, is that I spent about a month, 4 to 6 weeks of multiple days a week out there helping with that property.
So that's a real important takeaway too. Like whatever it takes, right? Like you're not too high and mighty to be like, oh, I'm the owner, I'm not going to pick up trash. No, you're trashing out units. What that means, everybody, for those of you who don't understand, is when there's a skip, meaning somebody flees in the middle of the night, right? They leave all their junk in the apartment, and it can potentially be super disgusting. It could be infested with fleas or whatever. And Nick, because he had to do what he had to do, you trashed out units. Like that's incredible. That is what it takes.
I went to Lowe's or Home Depot, got a suit, like a cheap jumpsuit to put on. And it was hot. And my father-in-law lives there in Abilene. I went by his house and asked if he had a snow shovel and a trash barrel, or maybe even a wheelbarrow. And he came over and helped me for a little bit. And so that unit was, I was like, these guys couldn't afford their rent, but they left all their clothes, all their pots and pans, all their just anything. And it was surprising how much stuff. I was literally shoveling. You couldn't see the floor in the whole apartment. It wasn't a single piece of clothing hanging up on. They had hangers in the closet, but none of their clothes were on the hangers, and pots and pans and food in the refrigerator still. It was, but we didn't have a good management company, and we're in the process of changing. So I'm like, I've got to get this unit. We had a lot of demand. I think there was a 3-bedroom for that floor plan, and we didn't have staff to get it ready. So I'm like, I'll get it cleaned out, and you guys, and I got everything but a king size mattress and a sofa out of that. It's the 2 things I couldn't get out by myself. And my father-in-law was older. I didn't want him helping me lift that stuff. But I said, all right, you guys, get these 2 big things out and clean this unit, paint it, and let's get it rented.
Here's a random factoid, man. I've only gotten like flea bites once in my life, and it is walking through apartment units. Like I had fleas all up my ankles and calves. It was an experience.
Own workforce housing, you'd be amazed at some of the things you see. Well, and I had done home health for 10 years before that, so I'd been in some pretty trying to put this nicely, some homes you be surprised. A lot of us would be surprised how some people live. A lack of cleanliness and clutter, and so I wasn't too shocked, but it was just, I was more shocked that they can't afford their rent, but they can afford to leave all their clothes and pots and pans and worldly belongings.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely relate to everything you're saying, Nick.
Yeah.
Now I want to learn about your podcast too. So Flex Forward, we see the sign in your background. Tell us about that, and tell us why you started that podcast.
I've wanted to do a podcast for many years, and just to get out to connect with more people, and to allow people to share their successes and things, kind of like me transitioning careers in my mid 40s, just to let people know that is a possibility, or people that have maybe started something when they're in their teens or 20s, but to share that it hasn't always been easy. The true road to success is is up and down and bumpy and twisty. A lot of people always say, oh, you're lucky that you were successful. I'm not a big believer in luck. I think that's 1% of any success. Or maybe if a football hits the ground and it makes an odd bounce right into your hands, that can be considered luck. But everybody that's successful has worked hard. To me, luck is when preparation meets opportunities. It's somebody that's worked hard, they prepared. And so that's what I wanted to highlight for other people who may be considering career changes or going through a challenging point in their life, that, keep plowing forward and keep digging for things. There's that, you've probably seen it's a pencil drawing where a miner's digging for gold and they stop just a couple of inches from hitting the gold. Sometimes you got to keep going and get through, and that's the resilient side. And that's what I think in multifamily and a lot of different real estate or entrepreneurial opportunities is having the resilience. Can you get knocked down and get back up? Thing. My wife and I, one thing we try to instill in our children is it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to stay down. Get knocked down and stay down. And we actually want to encourage our kids to fail because they're trying new things. Yes, you can go through life in a very narrow, protected path and have very few failures, but you're going right down the path and you're not growing. I think you've got to, if you want to grow and challenge yourself, you're going to fail.
Yeah, absolutely. Comfort is the killer of ambition and the killer of success.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long have you been doing this podcast, and can you share some inspiring stories that you've heard from some of your guests?
It's fairly new. We've been going about 2 months. I think one of the common threads, and I encourage everybody, if you haven't, is the Rich Dad Poor Robert Kiyosaki book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Talk to almost, I think 80 to 90% of the guests have that transition, their mindset of, having money work for them, not working for their money. I think it's just seeing people in different walks of life that have, it comes back to the resilience where they've had challenges and maybe within their career or their health, and they were just persistent and resilient to work through those and keep trying and get up and dust themselves off when things were hard.
Yeah, absolutely. What you're mentioning reminds me of the Elon Musk biography that I listened to an audiobook earlier this year. And you can say whatever you want about Elon Musk, but a couple things are objectively true. He is a genius. He has a mental capacity that is extremely rare.
Sure.
And the other is he is obsessively diligent to an extent that I didn't understand until I experienced that biography. One example of many being that he literally slept in a cot or in a sleeping bag or something of that sort, like at his Tesla factory, because they were running out of cash. And if things didn't get turned around, they were going to fail.
Yeah, and that's that resilience, or just doing what he needs. He's had that vision and would push through that. I've heard that story. That is on my wish list of books that I want to read or listen to at some point. But I've heard the same thing and you hear that a lot with people. Are they going to fight through it? Now, I've read an interesting book. This is a different era, but it's called The Big Rich. It's the 5 biggest oil families in Texas, and how those guys, their names you recognize now, because this is probably early 1900s, but many of them went boom or bust so many times. They were sleeping in the grass, in the ditch, drainage ditches on their drill pad sites, just because they had no money to even stay in a cheap hotel in town. Now these are people that names, if you're in Texas, you would recognize all 5 of the names as being probably some of the wealthiest families in the state. But these, probably the fathers of some of these guys were sleeping in, just in a drainage ditch between drilling, getting some rest in these drilling times, just as wildcatters. So interesting story. They were so driven to get it done.
Yeah, that's inspiring. So share with us a little bit about your journey, like some of the challenges that you've encountered and how you've dusted yourself off and gotten up.
Yeah. And, our first couple of properties we had, a very first property, the Sunscape, we had a fire property management company within the first 6 months. We had been working with this company as we're looking to buy stuff, and they actually owned properties in Abilene, but they had sold them. They'd lost all their connections, and they could not keep our property staffed. And so it's just having that constant turnover. And we switched to another property management company and had them for about a year, but they were bought by private equity. They quit focusing. We didn't have a regional out there. And so they started going downhill. We had we went from having mid to high 90% occupancy to just within a month, we lost everything. And again, it was staffing. And that's when I went out and took over our Cedar Creek property, took over the management. And at that point, we had 4 properties at that time, and they were all having challenges. And, that was getting out there, getting involved. And, at points I'm like, oh man, are we going to lose these properties? Cause we're hitting a point where we're occupancy is dropping. On Cedar Creek, we dropped almost 70% occupied. And I think at one point if they would have gone in and booked all the skips, we were probably below 70%. But then we brought that property up and got it stabilized. We got all our properties were in the 80s. We found a property management company that ran 4 other properties. We wanted somebody with a presence there. Their regional was from Abilene, and we've been using that company now for 4.5 years. But there was a period where me and the partners like, man, this is not going the way we want. It shouldn't be like this. And, just getting more involved. And, that was one of the biggest challenges that we've had. And now that our properties there have been 93% or better for over 4 years, and just nice and steady.
What that makes me think of, Nick, is these businesses, in your case, apartment complexes, they're really running on a razor's edge, and it doesn't take a whole heck of a lot for that to get derailed. And you go from 95% occupied, cash flow positive, to 75% occupied, and you're burning cash now. That literally happens in the span of 4 weeks, or it can. And ask me how I know. So it really is takes constant effort and an eye on the business, any business, not just apartments, to make sure that it's operating in an optimal way.
For sure. And it is scary, but the most important people on a multifamily apartment is your on-site staff. And so you're talking about a multi-million-dollar business is being run by somebody who may not have a college degree or is not in a business mindset. So, but I don't want to downplay that, our staff, because I wouldn't want the job. They are a salesperson to get people to lease. They're also a bill collector if somebody's not paying. They're a counselor for when your residents are having challenges. They're wearing a lot of different hats in that seat, but they're the most important people. And it's not us as the owners; it's the staff that's running your property. And the regional is important too. Having a regional that can oversee and be there to help your less experienced on-site managers and leasing agents. But when I got started in multifamily, it was when cap rates were compressing. So you could buy a deal and go to sleep almost and sell it in 2 or 3 years and double your investors' money. It's now the margins are a lot tighter. We're not having that cap rate compression. So you have to watch the operations. Those deals that were bought in the early teens, you didn't have to, your operations were okay. So I suspect those deals were hemorrhaging tens of thousands of dollars in operations, but they would buy it, cap rates would compress enough, you'd sell it and double everybody's money. And so people didn't care. They were still, you're putting 50K in and getting 100K out or 125K out in 2 to 4 years. Everybody was happy. But now you got to be on top of the operations and monitor them. It's, Riata Ranch that we bought from you, it was chugging along mid-90s, and I look at least twice a week. I just check the numbers and I watch availability and our what's leased going forward. But all of a sudden we dipped to 88 at one point, year and a half ago or so, and we ended up replacing that leasing agent that was there. But like you said, within a couple of weeks, it can drop, and you got to be careful. You want to catch it because it's momentum. If all of a sudden you've got a bad egg working and you see it at 88, you may not get that ship turned until you are into the low 80s.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Well, tell us how people can find you and find the Flex Forward podcast.
Yeah, okay. The Flex Forward podcast is on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, and you can also, I have you can connect with me through my Calendly. It's pretty easy. Visit with Nic.com. So just Nic with no K. But the Flex Forward podcast is on all the platforms.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to hearing some stories on your Flex Forward podcast. So that's visitwithnick.nic.com. Any parting words for our audience, Nic? You've shared a lot of gems with us today.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and you're going to be on my podcast. I know we've got something scheduled here before too long.
Yeah, we've got a swap going on.
Yes, and but I think if whatever you're looking to do, beyond stocks, any kind of alternative investments, is educate yourself on it and take action. I think some of the that analysis paralysis can get under all of it, to get in all of our brains, but you're not going to know 100% with 100% certainty that every box is checked correctly, but get as close as you can and then take some action. If it's something new, find somebody that's doing it, that's had success, and see if you can tag along with them, or a mentorship program. Because yes, a lot of time, or read a book or some podcast, listen to podcasts. I think get out there and take action is the most important thing.
Yep. That's very good advice. All right. Well, Nic, thank you very much for joining us here today. And everybody in the Beyond Stocks community, we'll see you next week. All right. Thank you, Nic.
Thanks, Chihiro.